At this point, probably it will start making sense to think about how we could build our fork. So I'm going to create a cube, scale it in edit mode, roughly to the size I guess I might need. And then in object mode, I'm going to rotate it. And the reason why I'm using object mode is you can see that in object mode, the arrows for the orientation changes. And that is also because I'm using the local space, which is what I want to use. Because it makes it a lot easier now, for example, to move this cube along the axis of my fork. And to make this a little bit easier, I'm going to reset my 3D cursor to the center of my wheel, select my cube and say snap selected to the cursor, because then I could go into edit mode and, for example, move this one up along the local z-axis, and then I could rotate it. And I'm using the wheel axis as the center for rotation, and see it this way, for example, perfectly line it up with my sketch. And yeah, move those parts up, because if we go back to our initial imported bike model, you can see that the fork basically is created out of two pipes. It's kind of like a reversed T, or if we are more specific, it's a banded pipe. So somehow we need to create two objects that look like this T. And to do this, I have this cross section or the loop cut in here. You can create a cross section, of course, by doing a loop cut, or you could select a face like the top one, press E and extrude it along the object center. Then you see that it creates this kind of like subdivision, because now I can select those two opposite points and then press E to extrude, press S for scale, and then I press X to scale them along the x-axis. And because they're equal points away from each other, they scale away equally from each other. And maybe at this point, taking a look at our bike might be a good helper to get a feeling for this proportion and scale. So as I can see, probably this part maybe looks like it's a little bit too high, so it could go down. And again, you see, because I'm using local orientation, it doesn't really matter what view I'm in. I could comfortably scale it down or move it down. I'm not really scaling. But if I go into edit mode now, I have one problem. I have two phases I need to work with all the time. To make life a little bit easier for me, I can temporarily create a loop cut, so Control R, and then I press 0 to make sure that loop cut is inserted at the center of my geometry. And then in shaded mode, I'm going to select all those points, press X to delete the vertices, so I click vertices, and then I can add the mirror modifier, so I have the other part added. Because now I can simply go ahead and just work on one side, and the other side isn't actively updated. So I basically cut my work down by half. As I said before, the T is more like here the pipe has to move down, so it's not like a perfect horizontal stroke. So somehow this face, for example, maybe for the beginning I move to here and then I extrude it out. Let's say move it to there, and now I have to rotate it. So I could press R and Y and Y. And if you pay attention to the lower left corner where my mouse is, you see if I press Y along global and along local if I press Y a second time. So press R, Y, Y. Then I'm going to rotate it along the local orientation. So for example, if I press R and Y only, you see it's getting twisted. That's not really what you want. So R, Y, Y. Or you could also use the rotate widget. And then maybe move this down a little bit. E again to extrude another piece, move it down. And now here I would like to rotate it so it's maybe kind of like flat again, so horizontal. And then this part, for example, I move down kind of like somewhere where my axis for my wheel would be. Let's say somewhere there. Okay, so let's take a look at this. That doesn't look too bad, but it feels a little bit too big. So let's sculpt this a little bit. I press the Alt key, click on this edge, and then I'm going to change the position of this loop cut. I'm going to do the same here. Maybe like this. And I try to even out the distance here a little bit. This one can rotate a little bit more. Okay, so at this point, for example, I could add a subdivision surface modifier. Sorry. And I would like to have the subsurface modifier after the mirror modifier. Again, let me show you what happens if I put the subsurface first. And this upper part here, I would like to open because it's just a pipe. And you see how this one is now open. If I put the mirror modifier up, you see it's closed. And again, that is because the first modifier is the mirror and it creates the other part. And then the result of my mirror modifier is being given to the subsurface modifier. That then smooths out the whole part. So let's make a quick reference or comparison to our spoke, and you see that, the fork, you see that our piece is a little bit too thick. So let's maybe go ahead and select all those points and then start sculpting this a little bit tighter. Maybe down here I would like to add another loop cut so I can tighten this corner a little bit. See? And down here I don't want it to be so sharp, so I add another loop cut and push it down, maybe till there. Okay, and that's basically how, for example, you can quickly create your primitive part for your fork.